Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this webinar entitled Unlocking Investments for Resilient Buildings Using IFC's Building Resilience Index. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared after this session. The International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group, is replicating its success in decarbonizing the building sector with EDGE Green Building Certification for climate change adaptation with Building Resilience Index. Building Resilience Index is a web-based hazard mapping and resilience assessment framework for buildings designed to facilitate access to location-based hazard information and providing measures to mitigate risks and improve transparency for disclosing a building's resilience between stakeholders with the goal of channeling capital toward more resilient buildings. Financial institutions have a key role to play in accelerating the transition to a more resilient building sector. We are already seeing forward-looking financial institutions responding to climate risks by encouraging borrowers to manage and adapt to climate change, responding to investor demand for climate-friendly portfolios, and financing more climate-smart investments. This panel brings together IFC and partners to explore how Building Resilience Index can promote scaling up green and resilient building practices and investments. At this juncture, I would like to invite Mr. Omid Saberi, Global Head of the Building Resilience Index Program and Senior Industry Specialist at the International Finance Corporation, to give us an introduction on Building Resilience Index.
Thank you, Angelo, and welcome to our panel members here. We'll introduce our panel members just after a few slides here. And I want to thank everyone to enable such presentation in COP27. We are in COP27 in a time where the action on climate mitigation and climate adaptation is more important than ever. Within the IFC part of the World Bank Group, we have been working with our partners like Arise Group to scale up the resilience. If we can move to the second slide, please. But in the meanwhile, before I introduce what we are doing within IFC, I just want to also thank Global Alliance for Building and Construction, which enabled this space for us to present Building Resilience Index. Global Alliance for Building and Construction is part of the UN, and we have been working with them on several working groups. One of them is the working group on adaptation, and the second group that we are working with is the working group on climate finance. And on both of those areas, this talk is very relevant to scale up the financing as well as looking at climate adaptation. Who we are IFC, part of the World Bank Group, and we are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group supporting private sector development globally. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So this slide is quite critical in understanding the role that we need to play in both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. The building sector, if you look at the building sector in the center, the building sector has two sides. On the left, the new construction is going on. We know that many of the emerging markets will double their building sector in next 10 to 20 years. And this level of construction will bring its own challenges in terms of emissions. And the emissions that in the building sector, that is already almost 40% of the global emissions, is going to increase emissions, and we are here in COP discussing how we can cap the emissions to cap the global warming to 1.5 degrees is going to be a challenge without tackling building sector. And climate change by itself brings more climate hazards, and climate hazards means that the buildings and cities will be damaged more and more by different events. Therefore, we really need to improve the resilience. And we have two programs. One is EDGE, that tackles the emissions, reducing the emissions, and on the other hand, building resilience index is developed to improve resilience of building sector. So we do not need to repair or reconstruct buildings damaged by climate hazards. Let's go to the next slide, please. We know that the disasters are quite costly and assets are mostly uninsured globally. On the graph in the left side, you can see the cost of damages, cost of losses due to different climate disasters since 1970. And the green bar shows insured losses and orange bar shows uninsured losses. As you see, there has been increasing losses due to climate hazards or disasters. And these disasters are year on year has been increased. But the interesting point of this slide is that a lot of the cost is going to, unlike the perception that insurance companies are paying for these disasters, in reality is that most of the costs are going from either government budget or businesses and personal savings. Let's go to the next slide, please. Investing in the resilience will be saving money to everyone. We have seen these examples happening over and over in many cases. The most recent disasters that we have seen in a small scale, just so that we understand, as an example, the building that was collapsed in Miami, Florida, was a building that the cost of repair of that building was around $200,000, but the cost of loss was more than $10 million, plus loss of people's life. The reality was that if that $200,000 was communicated transparently to the building owners and to the to people that they lived in that building, that would have been very small investment from each family to improve the resilience of that building. But when that investment has not happened, the cost of loss was massive. The same principle goes to all resilience aspects. Here you can see, based on a study that has been done by the National Institute of Building Science, for every dollar invested in resilience, the cost of repairs, for example, for the flooding, can be anything between $5 to $6 saving on cost of repairs once the event happened. So it's a really important message to say anything invested in resilience can save a large amount of money downstream. Within the World Bank Group, we have been working on different action plans on climate change and action plan on adaptation and resilience. The early discussion that has happened on that was in 2016, followed by a policy in 2019 on action plan on climate change, adaptation and resilience. The program that we are discussing here has been developed under that action plan under a wider building resilience rating systems that was adopted for all sectors, including infrastructure, cities, agriculture, and other sectors. Building Resilience Index has been developed specifically for buildings. Within the Building Resilience Index, one of the key messages that is important for our audience to know, because IFC is a financial institution and the work that we have done has been picked up by other financial institutions, it's important to mention we have a policy to look at Paris alignment in our investments. So by July 2023, 85% of all of our operations need to be Paris aligned. And Paris alignment has two aspects. One of them is climate mitigation, and the second one is climate adaptation. We also need to increase our climate finance to 35% of all our investments, and 50% of our climate finance within the whole World Bank group is need to be diverted toward the adaptation. So those are the principles that we follow within the World Bank group. And Building Resilience Index is one of the tools to support the resilience of building sector. Within IFC, we have been working with this principle of supporting financial institutions. So Joanne is here, and we will discuss around how financial institutions and local banks can support resilience. We also do direct investment in projects and different types of projects, from housing to hospitals and different asset classes. We work with governments. So my colleague Angelo here will explain maybe some examples of how we are working in Philippines with government agencies to bring resilience and incentives and policies. And finally, we developed the application so that everyone can benefit from the system of how to measure and disclose resilience of their assets. The Building Resilience Index has these few principles that briefly we will mention here. Number one is how to identify risk for different locations. This is to identify applicable natural hazards and vulnerabilities based on the specific location of the building. This is the first time an application is opening this solution and this data to public. Obviously, it's a start, but the aim is that on every location on the planet, you should have access to data about hazards and vulnerabilities. Right now, the application would be reporting on wind, water, fire, and geoseismic hazards. There's the category of different hazards group are listed here. And this data has been collected for Philippines. We have been also collecting it for Caribbean islands, and the idea is to expand this to a global database that will be accessible to everyone. The second element is on how to manage the risk in terms of physical integrity and operational continuity. Once you know what are the hazards in your location, you can access different measures to improve your assets, and that's engineering measures that engineers they can use to improve the assets resilience. And finally, there would be a disclosure mechanism that the building can rate their building, the building that is rated. They can then disclose this to financial institutions or insurance companies or governments. And those institutions can provide better financing or better insurance to the buildings that they have better or higher level of resilience. Those elements are designed in a sense that can support a design team or building owner all the way to insurance or financial institution. Within the Global Alliance for Building and Construction and under the adaptation working group, these 10 principles are identified as important principles of resilience. And this slide is showing how Building Resilience Index is aligned with these 10 principles. It's important to discuss these principles in a sense that these are the key principles that brings the Building Resilience Index or resilience tools to be more effective in the marketplace and be able to scale up as well as be able to be effective. So if you look at these elements, for example, Building Resilience Index touches the urgency of the matter, how important it is for us to act and act urgently on resilience in terms of our cities and buildings, bringing the stakeholders, different players to the game. And here we are with the ARISE, which is one of the global largest networks of private sector players that will be discussing about the stakeholders in terms of process, making sure that we cover design, post-construction, and existing buildings. how we are dealing with mitigation. Building Resilience Index is a sister tool to EDGE, and EDGE has been one of the fastest growing rating systems on mitigation and green buildings. In terms of data and disclosure, we have been collecting data, and we continue collecting data on resilience, on greening, as elements like nature-based solutions or elements that relate to how to improve buildings conditions, not only on resilience, but also operational continuity is part of the Building Resilience Index. Training people, such as verifiers and engineers around the world is part of our program on the resilience, financial solutions, and making sure that the system is locally relevant. So all of these elements has been designed, and we are thankful for Global ADC that advocating these principles around the world. So Building Resilience Index is actually benefiting different players in the game, from construction developers to improve the resilience of their assets and be able to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. We have seen that happen on the building side and green building side, and we like to introduce that on the resilience side. For the banks and financial institutions, it's important to show that assets are resilient to protect their investments. For insurance companies to be able to have better underwriting conditions with better and more clarity on the asset classes. For the government and authorities, property owners and occupants, all of them will be benefiting from Building Resilience Index program. Finally, I just want to also mention that Building Resilience Commitment has been a program within the Philippines that we brought different stakeholders from Arise Network to different developers of housing, office buildings, and even universities to come together, work together to review the assets that they own and find ways to improve the resilience of these assets. So far, we had more than 2 million square meters of projects that are pledged to improve their resilience in the Philippines using Building Resilience Index program. This includes around 12 construction developers and 50 projects, and roughly around 10,000 housing units. This program started from Philippines, but the idea is that this will become a global program, and every country would have similar programs as we go forward. Here, we want to also thank our donors. We have been working with the government of the Netherlands, Australian government, and the Rockefeller Foundation. They have been supporting Building Resilience Index program, and without their support, this program will not be where we are today. And I want to thank them as well as the partners that they supported us as organizations such as Arise Network, Build Change, FM Global, GFDRR, Miyamoto, as well as Resilience Action Fund that supported us. We'll be hearing from Aris in a second. He's the co-chair of the Resilience Action Fund to hear his points here. So back to you, Angelo, and we can hear Aris's video.
Thank you so much for that overview of Building Resilience Index, Ahmed. Yes, so at this point, talking about our partners, we'd like to play a short video of Aris Papadopoulos, one of our technical experts for Building Resilience Index, and also the founder of the Resilience Action Fund.
Hello, COP27 attendees. My name is Eris Papadopoulos. I'm the founding chair of the...
Sorry, we are not seeing the screen, we are seeing the folder, so maybe.
Hello, COP27 attendees. My name is Eris Papadopoulos. I'm the founding chair of the nonprofit Resilience Action Fund, a distinguished expert in resilience at Florida International University, construction veteran, 9/11 World Trade survivor, and author of the book Resilience, the Ultimate Sustainability. I was also first chair of the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction Private Sector Initiative, now known as ARISE. I'm honored to be serving as Chief Technical Advisor to the World Bank International Finance Corporation's Building Resilience Index, known in short as BR.
Let me share the screen. I think there's a technical issue from your side. Let me try to share from my side. Now we can see the screen. If we can play it again, that would be great. Thank you. But we cannot hear the voice anymore. Let me play it from my side. Pel, can you stop sharing, please? We cannot hear the voice. Okay.
Thank you so much for that message, Aris. And we do apologize for the technical difficulties. After this session, we'll upload a recording of the webinar along with that video on our YouTube channel, as well as in the COP27 platform, so you can watch it. So at this juncture, I'd like to call back to the virtual stage, Omid Saberi, Global Manager for Building Resilience Index Program. And joining him are our panelists. We have Ms. Liza Silerio, Arise Global Member and Vice President for Corporate Compliance of SM Prime Holdings, the largest developer, owner, and operator of shopping centers in the Philippines. And we also have with us Ms. Joan Ayala, Vice President and Head of Sustainability Office at Bank of the Philippine Islands, one of the largest banks in the Philippines and a pioneer in the sustainable finance space. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us. At this point, I'd like to first open the floor with a question for Liza. You are representing both Arise and SM, and what insights can you share about your experience engaging with Building Resilience Index?
Okay, so thank you very much, Angelo. I'd like to make a short introduction of our country. You know, Philippines is consistently ranked in the top 10 countries prone to disasters over the years, with an average of 10 typhoons per year, you know, aside from other hazards, earthquakes, and volcanic eruption. And just recently, the World Risk Index ranked Philippines #1. So we have the first-hand experience on the impacts of disasters. Thus, we have been looking for solutions, how to prepare, adapt, and mitigate. And as far as resilience tools are concerned, we're looking for the best tools that will benefit our business model. And I believe many large corporations are looking for the same solutions. So resilience awareness in the Philippines is moderate to high, and we have made progress because of the support of the government and also the active participation of the private sector. The Building Resilience tool, I would say, is innovative and user-friendly and easy to navigate. You know, our in-house designers are now recommending the use of the said tool to our consultants for their pre-engineering assessment needs because it's easily accessible online and location-specific that makes use of the Philippine government's Hazard Hunter, the source of multi-hazard data that is coming from the Department of Science and Technology and PHIVOLCS, which makes it highly credible. So in my experience, promoting the Building Resilience tool is easy. It was easy for me, not just because of the good features of the product, but also because of the reputation of the developer, such as IFC. There was an easy buy-in, I will say, especially it was free to the users. The user cost must be made clear. Likewise, we also look at the range of audience in inviting users. We have to target the right people. And Angelo, I would also like to say that you were able to articulate the value that the tool delivers. Through Arise Philippines Network, our co-chairs, Mr. Hansi and Vice Admiral Pama, you know, they were promoting the tools a lot with our members. We were able to encourage Arise Philippine members and other big businesses, real property estate developers, including our 4 SM Prime holdings, are already engaged in the tool. And I'm happy to say that we were able to introduce it to Ortigas Center Business District Association. I think this is the largest CBD in the Philippines with around 100 building members. We have also introduced this to the Philippine Institute for Civil Engineers, or the PICE, the largest membership of engineering professionals in the Philippines, and they are now promoting it. A lot of tools exist, no? But this is a challenge, no? Where we need to choose the right one for the business. And we noted that the brief covers the basic of our requirements. The tool is good for strategic assessments at the early stage of the project. It can diagnose and conceive, and portion applicable at the operation and maintenance stage. And for the real property developers and building owners, we look at resilience in the preparedness stage. And since it complements the government's data for multi-hazard, the Hazard Hunter of DOST, we see high confidence on the part of the users. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Such a powerful testimonial. So earlier, Ahmed mentioned about the Resilience Pledge, so Building Resilience Commitment Campaign. So SM was actually one of the pledgers in the Resilience Pledge. So we're always grateful for your support, as well as in your role in the ARISE board. At this point, we're going to shift from the property sector to the financial sector. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask, how important is the role of the banking sector? Where do you see this role going? So banking sector, including other financial institutions, in enhancing resilience in the built environment?
Well, first, banks, because of its role in financing built projects, have a very enabling role. It actually defines what a bank does in terms of its contribution to ESG initiatives of a country, because what we decide to finance and what we decide not to finance defines really the principles that we uphold. So in the case of our sustainability initiatives in BPI, which we've started since 2008, you would see that we're very consistently following IFC standards, and in this particular case, EDGE standards, for a screening for projects that can really be qualified as green buildings. So all projects that we place in our Sustainable Development Finance portfolio, I've noted that there are already 51 that have been financed by BPI. They all met that minimum 20% savings as prescribed by EDGE, and there are 6 more in the pipeline. But the question is, how soon can they get their certification? Because the mere fact that the clients actually were so happy, they were willing to comply with the 20% savings in energy, water, and embedded energy and materials, that makes them candidates for EDGE certification. So a lot of them are in the process. We're still working on it. But what I'm happy to note is that we walk the talk. So BPI was able to have, of the 5 targeted branches, we have had 2 already certified by EDGE, thanks to your support. So what is the role of the bank? So I said there, be a role model and then implement it. Make sure that when you look at guidelines for defining what is truly green, have a set of standards. And in this case, EDGE standards are quantifiable, clearly measurable, with a system that's available online, allowing you to keep track of exactly how compliant you are, and translating savings into actual, not only technical computations, but also peso value equivalents. So that capability of the banks to decide who to support and who to guide towards the proper way of greenifying a building, I think that's where the biggest role of a bank is. And in the case of the Philippines, as Lisa mentioned earlier, we are already considered number 4 most vulnerable in the world. And if you are in the typhoon belt with 20 to 24 typhoons a year and an average of 20 earthquakes a day, it becomes a very compelling proposition for a bank to really encourage adopting measures to identify risks and to do something about those risks, and to measure whether indeed those risks are addressed. So that's why I really appreciate being invited to this webinar, and having to represent the Philippines is another, because we are indeed a very good case, a very good example for a country that really needs to look into a set of standards that would measure management of these risks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and for highlighting the important role of the financial sector in encouraging green and resilient building design and construction. Moving forward, as we work on the EDGE side, We also want to work with you on building resilience index towards the creation of perhaps resilience finance products on encouraging resilient construction or even mortgage products for consumers. So thank you so much. So we have the perspective of the property sector. We also have the perspective of the financial sector, but this work actually encompasses a wide range of stakeholders. And earlier we mentioned that this is the dynamic that we are implementing here in the Philippines, but we'd also like to hear more about what's happening globally for Building Resilience Index. So for Omid, can you tell us a bit more about IFC's experience, not just with the pilot, but in the rollout of Building Resilience Index globally?
Yes, thanks, Angelo. And I think what Lisa and Joanne mentioned, in a sense, that the participation of our partners is critical, right? For us to be able to scale up any program, what we need is partnerships. And part of the reason why Global Alliance for Building and Construction is critical player, and I invite our partners also to join the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, is that they come together from different segments, from the governments, from the banking sector, from United Nations and others, everyone together to put our efforts together to move the needle. This is something that no single organization can handle. It's a large task, and we all need to work together to move forward. What we are doing within IFC globally, we have been, we have started our work in the Philippines, obviously with having such a great partners like Joanne and Lisa and other partners in Philippines, and also the fact that Philippines is an important country in terms of exposure to hazards, but also a country that has been forward-looking on making resilience as one of their key actions. I was reading a piece on how people from Philippines have resilience built into their genes. Basically, you have been facing this in the history for years, and it's kind of your culture to be able to prepare yourself for different elements and improve resilience. But when you move to the global perspective, the next area that we have been working with is within Caribbean islands. We have been working in Dominican Republic with one of our partner banks there as well, similar to BPI. The bank name is BHT. Unfortunately, this time of the day is not the best time here in Washington, DC, and this region is around 2 a.m. So we couldn't invite our partners from Dominican Republic to join us and present here. But they have been doing similar work that we are doing in the Philippines. The idea there is to start with, the bank started with testing their own buildings first. They are now using Building Resilience Index to review their own buildings. But they also invited their clients to come and review their buildings with Building Resilience Index. After this review, our idea is that then we come up with a financial solution to the bank that the bank can provide green resilience finance. So the idea, similar on Edge, that they are providing financing for green buildings. The idea is that the banks will finance resilient buildings as well. One of the solutions that would be quite interesting is a mix of resilience and green buildings. So we can have solutions for financing an EDGE certified building that is also have resilience rating. So having these two together would be quite an attractive solution. We are seeing on the EDGE side, Angelo, the pickup of EDGE has been really fascinating. In Colombia, for example, now we have every 5 buildings that is built, one of them is EDGE certified. And in Colombia, there is the government solutions that provide better financing, in terms better incentives like tax incentives, permit incentives, different types of incentives. There are 5 commercial banks that they provide financing for green buildings. And we have the industry association supporting the green building program. We also have universities training students on green buildings. So all in all, when you put the professionals, you put the private sector, you put the banks, you put the government, all together enable the market to move quite rapidly on green buildings. The idea on resilience is the same, that we want to make sure that all the market players, they all play their own roles, and that then the market starts shifting. We are also looking at moving Building Resilience Index to Vietnam and also other countries. So those are our current status of work. We have been hearing a lot of interest from many players, and we have been hearing interest from Africa, from India, from Egypt, different countries. They come to us and say they need to introduce Building Resilience Index. So the need is there, the capacity and the support is needed to be able to serve all markets as we go forward.
Thank you so much for those insights, Ahmed. And I think the Colombia case study is such a great example. As you mentioned, one of every 5 new construction in Colombia are being built as green. And that's really the aspiration, right? 20% of new construction to be built as green and hopefully resilient. And that case study dovetails nicely with my next question to Ms. Lisa about, how do we reach that point where, let's say, 20% of your shopping centers are going to be built as green and resilient? So what are the challenges to financing resilience that you see in your work, or even from the perspective of the Arise Private Sector Alliance? Do you have something you can share there? Oh, you're on mute, Chair Liz. Sorry.
Okay. Well, the challenges, resilience is always seen as a cost, not as an investment. The upfront cost makes resilience challenging, even when they come with long-term financial benefits. And the cost of financing resilience competes for resources with other more immediate needs and objectives of the companies. We are all aware that communicating long-term benefits is challenging. But let me also say, on the good side, that large businesses in the Philippines like SM Prime, Ayala Properties of the BPI Group of Joanne, the Mega World, to name a few, the top companies in the Philippines welcome resilience. So in SM, resilience is part of our business core strategies. We allot around 10% of our capex to financing resilience, and it enhances the image of the company and attracts more investors. So there's much benefits and value to the company when you speak about ESG plus resilience, not only to the public, protecting the public and your customers, but as well as a wider global audience. However, I think we should also recognize that there are no incentives at the moment. So it will be good if government can give recognition, maybe not in the financial recognition or in something else, like in kind, develop an innovative recognition for companies who incorporate resilience in their businesses. Ahmed mentioned collaboration, public-private sector collaboration and partnerships. This is really key and critical. I can also say that now we have to continue the awareness of understanding the risk, accessibility of the data, and the information to access the risk. Because the financing resilience is not flowing at the pace required for a country like the Philippines. So we have to really get there, but continue the information and education awareness and push more harder. And the government also has a key role on this. When the government moves, the private sector will definitely follow. So I think that's one of the things that I would like to share here on the challenges. Thank you. And I think another one is to overcome barriers. There are also barriers that we have seen and noted as per our ARISE members, clear metrics, science-based targets, develop business cases maybe, and finance models, and more public-private collaboration. Thank you.
Absolutely, collaboration is very important. And just on that note of government incentives, I think that's really the stakeholder group that's missing in today's session. We have property sector, we have financial sector, we have CSO. And I think this thread goes back to the Colombia case study, right? Because that's really where we saw everyone really work together, real estate developers, you have the banks creating green finance products with incentives, and we have local governments creating an enabling environment for green buildings. And I hope that we can also have the same dynamic for resilient buildings here in the Philippines and also in the other pilot countries for Building Resilience Index. Just going back to the role of financial sector, Joanne, we want to develop Building Resilience Index in such a way that it would really be beneficial to the investing or lending or even the insurance underwriting process. How can we develop Building Resilience Index in such a way that it would benefit you so that we can increase its uptake in the market?
You know, in the Philippines, I always see green buildings as supposedly a not very difficult concept to sell. It's a combination of savings in a big way, because we have one of the most expensive electricity in the region. We compete for a gold medal when it comes to having the most expensive electricity. So saving on electricity is an easy sell, which is part of greenifying a building. Now, and as mentioned earlier, if you're in the typhoon belt and you're in the Pacific Ring of Fire, that becomes another way of selling it. So you have a profitability route and you have a risk mitigation route. So to your question, how would it be easier? No, I think it's an educational campaign. This has been doing since 2008. We have been spending a lot, no, on educating the public as far as the need to be sustainable is concerned, with resilience as one of the key messages. So incentivize and scare, maybe to put it bluntly, but you know, we're talking of facts. We're talking about truths that if we do not act on, it also they pose threats, no, financially, and also threats in the form of loss of lives. So so that's one. So carrot and stick. And then on the other side, I do agree with the position that this will have to be a partnership, not only between among the private sector players like Lisa and myself, but also with the government. Because when you have regulatory intervention, just look at the reporting requirements now. It is when the SEC came up with sustainability reporting requirements in 2019 that publicly listed companies started becoming more conscious of sustainability. And then here comes the central bank asking for sustainable finance framework. So now banks are really getting into the details of how it is to come up with a sustainable finance program. So there is so much value in the intervention of regulators. And then the third piece of the puzzle is what PRI can offer, which is standards. You know, when you have a set of standards which clearly define taxonomies, what do you follow? What is the definition of? What qualifies as? These eligibility criteria would allow everybody to have one set of definitions, standards that would guide us as to how really it is to be resilient and sustainable. I think that's the key role of BRI here, and that's why I like it a lot. And I really hope soon that kind of adoption takes in, and I think it will happen. Sadly, we need these calamities to happen for us to drive the message across. But sometimes just the way Yolanda or Typhoon Haiyan hit us in 2013, there is an underlying silver lining. There comes a point where it serves as a reminder of for the urgency of these initiatives, and one of these is the adaptation of an immediate adaptation of a standard that's not just for the Philippines. No, this is a global standard that will have help us come up with that consistent set of measures to be sustainable and resilient. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And it seems like we're competing for the gold. I totally agree with that. On the mitigation side, highest prices for electricity in Asia, I think next to Japan. And I think
Yes.
what Chair Liza mentioned earlier about the Philippines, #1 in the World Resilience, World Risk Index of the country with the highest disaster risk in the world, published only last September. So we're #1, but not in a good way. But I like what Joanne mentioned about awareness, the lack of awareness being one of the key barriers that we should overcome. And then what also Liza mentioned about financing for resilience. We don't have a lot of that capital going around. So those are actually the two main barriers to the uptake of green and resilient buildings in an emerging market context. So just talking about increasing financing at the global level. And Ahmed, please tell us more about what IFC is trying to do with Building Resilience Index. Why was this tool created? And what is IFC's role in terms of encouraging resilience financing and compliance with for example, NDCs for the countries, or BB2, or some of those other standards?
Yeah, I mean, Angelo, I think that part of the story I want to say is how spot on the points has been from Liza and also from Joanne on why this is difficult, but at the same time, why this is important, right? So Liza mentioned in terms of this is an investment that it's a hurdle when you do an investment and you know that this investment is not paying back on the spot to you. So there's that point. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there's an upfront cost, right? And what would be the role of us as IFC? One piece that we can play with is to bring the international governments to the donor governments that we have been working with. For example, on the EDGE front, we have been working with the UK government, and they provided us what we call blended finance, which is then supports banks with lower interest rates or better financing for greening the buildings. And our ask here within the COP27 is to say we are here to facilitate such financing that can also support resilience. I know a lot of governments, they also want to support resilience, but they don't have channels or processes by which they can then take the money down to every single building to improve the resilience. Obviously, if you look at every single house, if we go to a homeowner, for example, in the Philippines, we go to a homeowner and say, you need to improve the resilience of your asset. The cost of improving that resilience is too small, even for BPI possibly, or for IFC to be able to deal with a single transaction in a small volume. But when we put these transactions together, we had a champions event last week, and one of our champions from the South Africa, they mentioned very interesting program on how reducing interest rates on the refinancing forms can then be used, the difference that in that cost can be used to improve greening of assets. So maybe we can use the same principle to improve the resilience of each asset by reducing the cost of interest. And that differentiation of the cost of interest then can be used to improve the resilience. And that can be covered by international donors. And that kind of mechanism can be used for us to divert the global finance or global capital to small homeowners or buildings to improve. Joanne, you want to say something on this?
Yes, actually, I'd welcome that a lot. No, if there could be some source of funding where we as a bank could be given lower than commercial rates, no, for lending to not just the big projects, as you gave as an example. No, you were talking of houses, especially houses in the countryside, houses in areas which we know would be more vulnerable to storm surges or even earthquakes, not just climate, because that's one thing about the Philippines. We have both climate and non-climate. But if we can have access to that kind of financing from donors, etc., we have been looking for one. So please do let us know, because we have the network to actually provide that support to the country. Thank you.
Yeah, agree.
And we
agree,
hear
Joanne.
you, we hear you, Joanne. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the hour, but if I can ask our panelists a sentence or two as a call to action for our listeners. Chair Liz?
Okay, Arise Philippines is here. We are committed to increase awareness, share knowledge, and conduct fora and webinars to promote resilience and to promote the benefits of investing in resilience. We need the government to strengthen this goal. Education, knowledge development, especially in the risk awareness. We need influencers also, people who walk the talk to promote resilience, a good marketing campaign. And lastly, the shift to resilience, promoting theory to practice and action. So I think this is what we need, and we can all work together in the government, the private sector, academe, and other areas. Civil society will work together in building resilience of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Always great to have you, Joanne.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Really, the call to be resilient is most important for a country like us in the Pacific Ring of Fire, in the Typhoon Belt. So, but we need, all forces joining together, from government to the private sector, to and the public as a whole. And having a tool like PRI is very, very much welcome. It's necessary to be in place. So if we can all be supportive of PRI, I would be there as well. And as an initial step, let's be aware of our risks, so that we would understand why this is necessary. So public education, public awareness is the initial first step, and let's do this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne, for that inspiring last message. Ahmed, I'll let you close the session.
I just want to say a special thank you to everyone that listened to this, as well as to our panelists, Lisa and Joanne. And to you, Angelo, thank you for your work in the Philippines. I think this is a start. We have a long way to go, but with partnership, I'm sure that we can make this happen. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, evening, or morning.
Omid, can I just thank Mr. Aris Papadopoulos for introducing us to this IFC tool. Thank you very much, Aris.
Yes, of course. And Aris and Arise team together, we have been, really having these partnerships together has been the way for that enabled building resilience index. And to your point, Aris has played an amazing role in this game. Thank you so much, Aris. While you're not here, but we want to thank you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.